Hello, Kristen. Thank you for coming, joining us. I'm really happy to have you because we're going to go to the root of these issues today. I want to introduce you first for listeners who might not be familiar with your work, viewers and listeners. Kristen Ulmer is a thought leader, high performance facilitator, and fear anxiety expert who draws from her tenure as a Hall of Fame most fearless woman extreme skier in the world for 12 years, from studying Zen for 15 years, and from facilitating over 10,000 clients on the subject of fear, anxiety, and achieving flow states. Her remarkable work has been featured in such media as NPR, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, USA Today, Ferriss's Tribe of Mentors, The Rob Report, The Megyn Kelly Show, over 150 podcasts, and many more. Kristen is the author of The Art of Fear, Why Conquering Fear Won't Work, and What to Do Instead, which radically challenges existing norms about what to do about this misunderstood emotion. Yes, thank you again, Kristen.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, where can we start? Well, let's start right at the root, because as far as I'm concerned, I mean, maybe that's putting it a little too sharply, but I'd rather say something like, it comes down to, it feels like, that fear and love are options. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely being talked about quite a bit these days that we want to choose love over fear. I would also like to be taller. I would also like to be younger. It's wishful thinking, the thought that we can actually choose our state of being. And I understand why people teach this, because they want to be optimistic and say that we do have a choice. But I'm here to say that we actually don't. we have a choice in how we can react to fear, but we don't have a choice on whether we can replace it with love. And we get that wrong. It's actually problematic when that's taught. And I know that this is going to be the first of many controversial things I say, because I mean, you ask 1,000 people out there that teach about emotional intelligence, and 9,900 or 10,000, let's say 9,999 of them will say, oh yes, of course you can choose love over fear. And I'm saying you can't. So listen up, this is why. And this is an analogy. So imagine if, and the traditional number in Zen is 10,000. So imagine if you have 10,000 children that you live with, God forbid, that's a lot of children, but half of them you've named love, joy, gratitude, forgiveness. And the other children you've named fear, anger, sadness, despair. Despite our best intentions, would we be able to treat all of these children the same way? And definitely not if the message is that we can choose to be aligned with these children. So what we tend to do is we tend to love and nurture and show off to the world and cultivate these children over here. And what do we do with these children? Well, we push them away. We put them in the basement. We lock the door. We throw away the key. And oh, we're celebrating our love, our choice of love over here. And then the second something goes south, maybe there's traffic or you stub your toe and you're like, and you have a dramatic overreaction. Well, what that is you cannot deny these children their rightful place in your life. Zen is about including them and taking them out of the basement and learning how to love and nurture them and welcome them into our lives in a loving, artful way. And then they won't have to be burning down the house from the basement, or like we think that Elvis has left the building, but no, they are still there, but now they just showed up in a shadowed way. And so I'm here to say that no, it's not a choice of love over fear. love is equal to fear, and fear is actually every bit as wonderful as love if we learn how to treat it properly. And in fact, I wouldn't want to live in a world that didn't involve fear, not just for safety's sake, but we'd all be so bored. So
Yes, thank you, thank you. I'm so glad that I started posing with not quite the right way my question. And my question again is, it's what I'm hearing is that the on the side of our children that are fear and anger and anxiety are also, when we are looking into that and when we are including that, that is actually love as well, because they have a root that is absolutely necessary and beautiful and useful, and everything that is love is also in that. Would you say that would be a better way of posing my question?
yes, like, can we have love for fear and sadness and anger and despair?
Yes,
You
yes.
know, if we're just trying to override them, like if you actually see fear as a person, and let's say this is my fear and it shows up, and then I'm like, okay, I want nothing to do with you. I'm going to go with love. And this is another person over here, right?
Good
And
luck
I'm
with
lining with
that.
this. It's so disrespectful to fear. But if I turn towards love, I'm like, hey, love, there's fear right there. Can we learn how to love fear? And the answer hopefully will be yes. That's what we're going for. And the other thing I want to say about, because you use the word anxiety, what is the relationship between fear and anxiety? Because I hear all the time that people say, oh, I don't have any fear, but I have an anxiety disorder. Well, news alert, surprise, something else that may be shocking for people. Anxiety is fear. Fear is anxiety. It's just that because we've so fear shamed each other, and we assume that fear means scared or afraid, but that's just one small way that fear manifests as. It's just the new name that we've given it. Anxiety is the new name because nobody wants to call it fear anymore because there's too much shame around the word fear. But they're exactly
Beautifully said.
the same.
Yes, beautifully said. And I've heard you in your interviews and presentations, I believe, also call jealousy and anger fear, which I couldn't agree more. Could you talk about that? Yeah.
Right. It's a way that fear, if you don't want to deal with fear, it winds up showing up covertly in a redirected way, maybe as excessive. Well, let me even back up a little bit. So jealousy is normal, anger is normal, sadness, fear, it's all part of life. The second there's human life, there's going to be these emotional states. And the primary emotions, kind of like their primary colors of red, yellow, and blue, from which all the infinite number of color patterns are created, there's also primary emotions from which all of the human emotional state is created. And those emotions are, some studies are just fear, sadness, and joy. Those are the three primary emotions. And that anger is just fear's fight energy. But I actually think that anger has a quality unto itself as well that burns hot and fast, and it's very powerful. So I say fear, anger, the primary colors, primary emotions: fear, anger, sadness, joy, and then a fifth one, which is, some call it our sexuality. I call it our erotic nature that includes the sexual. And if we're not in flow with any of these five, we're just going to have a lot of problems in our lives. And they're all kind of intertwined and mashed together. Like I just said, that anger is fear's fight version of energy. And if you repress one, you inadvertently repress all of them. If you don't want to deal with them, and repress is one word, there's so many different ways to resist these emotions that are making up a human experience. We can rationalize them away. We can let them go as another form of resistance. We can try to replace them with love, which we already talked about. We can ignore them. There's so many different resistance patterns. I actually say 8 billion people on the planet. There are 8 billion different ways to resist feeling these emotions. Alcohol, drugs, for example. I mean, the list goes on. Oh, shopping.
Working.
cooking, like none of these, shopping, cooking, like eating, alcohol, none of these things are a problem. But if you do them to an excess, then they become a problem, because if we're not in flow, listen to the word flow. You mentioned in my bio that I'm a flow specialist. We got to be in flow with these 5 primary emotions. They are going to be a part of our lives. We're here to actually feel these things in our human form. And so if we're in flow with them, then our lives are going to still be challenging, right? Fear's no fun. Sadness is painful, but it's just, we're here to feel, and that's all it'll be. But if we resist them in any way, 8 billion different ways to resist them, we kink the hose, right? And that emotion just stops and gets stuck in our bodies. And then it just starts recirculating round and round until it'll show up in one of 3 ways: either an exaggerated version of itself, maybe a sexual pathology or excessive anxiety disorder, anger issues, panic attacks, or it'll show up, it'll flood into our thoughts and show up in our thoughts. Like, these emotions are just supposed to be in our bodies, leading to thought-free intuitive action, kind of like you see with animals. But we're more complicated than animals, in that we then try to rationalize these feelings away or emotions away. Somehow we've got it in our heads that we're not supposed to be feeling these things, or that emotional intelligence is our ability to control these feelings. So it'll flood into our mind, and next thing you know, wind up being monkey mind, maybe in the middle of the night, or just being in our heads all the time. Or what you were talking about with jealousy, for example, or anger, it'll, with the hose kinked, it'll get really clever and redirect itself and show up in another way entirely. Like, if you don't deal with fear, it may show up as incredible anger, or it may show up as incredible sadness, or it could show up as excessive jealousy. So that's what I teach. I've now kind of mixed analogies, the children and the flowing water, but I think everybody understands what I'm talking about.
So as you were talking about this, when you mentioned the kink in the hose first, it made me think that kink happens with the thinking process, by putting meaning on top of fear, by saying, oh, it's not good, whatever meaning we're putting. It's like insult on top of injury. And I was thinking that is what creates the kink, the kink in the hose, yes. And then, though, is that correct? Is that how you mean it? Or, because I heard you later also say that the flooding then directs it to the thinking process.
It's a great
Can we go
question.
over that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great question. The biggest form of resistance to feeling emotions, in particular fear, that I see is being in our heads, trying to understand them and rationalize them away. Mm-hmm. And so, like animals, there's the incident that the amygdala interprets as a threat, and then there's the emotion, and then there's the reaction: fight or flight, freeze. And at no point is there any thought involved. Like, the amygdala is not a thought-producing part of the brain. It's an emotion-producing. But with humans, we're not animals. Like, there's the incident that warrants the emotion, which, by the way, all day, every day, the amygdala sees threats. 11 million bits of data per second. If even one of them coming in per second, if even one of them warrants a threat, which there always is a threat, it'll manufacture fear. So fear is with us every single moment of every single day, in every interaction we have. We are not going to be able to figure out what is causing the threat or what is the threat. But we're going to try. So what we do is, there's the threat that we have no conscious awareness of. Then there's the emotion, which is just discomfort. I want to make sure that people are understanding that when I say fear, I mean any kind of sensation of discomfort in our bodies. I don't mean scared or afraid. And then, instead of that leading to fight, flight, or freeze, the third step with humans is we then start thinking about it, right? There's the emotion itself, and then how we feel about the emotion. It's like emotion plus thoughts is the feelings. And then our interpretation of them as being bad because of emotion shaming or fear shaming in our culture, we then try to get rid of it because of what we're taught to do. We hide our emotions, let's just talk about fear. We're embarrassed about our fear. We're ashamed of it. We think that there's something wrong with us that we have it. And then emotional intelligence is taught in our cultures as our ability to understand our emotions, even though we're never going to be able to understand them, and control or manage them, even though we're never going to be able to control them. So next thing you know, we're trying to understand and control something we can't understand, we can't control. And next thing you know, the thing that we're fighting or fleeing is the emotion itself rather than the situation. So we fight fear. The conquering, overcoming, that's where all that language comes from. We run away from fear. We play it safe, safety first, right? We don't do the thing that scares us as a way to limit fear. We freeze in the face of it. So fear, this is interesting, doesn't make anyone freeze. It's our reaction to the fear that makes us freeze. Like, this is fear, shows up, always there. It's like, I'm going to fight you, right? You're going to now be at war, using your mind as a weapon with a natural, normal part of life. And you're just going to have a hard life. You can run away from it, but run, you can't get away. Or you can freeze when it's around, like, oh my God, there's fear, right? And it's all because we're dealing with our emotions intellectually. And dealing with our emotions intellectually, we do because of fear shaming, first of all. And second, because our modern school system just seeks to take our intellect to the top of the mountain, and it's all that we're taught. When somebody's deemed intelligent, they're intelligent up here. And so we're just all so in our heads. We've lost our ability to feel. Nobody wants to feel. They don't want to be around your emotions. They don't want to deal with their emotions. We're all ashamed of them, and we're just in our heads trying to rationalize them away and get rid of them and replace them with love. We're back there again. Ignore them.
We can't actually feel them because
Right. And
there's so much stagnation of backed up emotion, right?
right.
If we were to actually, sorry.
Yeah. So NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy, all these things that we teach on to deal with anxiety issues are actually the cause of anxiety issues, because we're dealing with our emotions intellectually and we're trying to understand and control them and get rid of them. And so it just keeps us in these resistance patterns. So yes, the reason why I loved your question is because us being in our heads about our emotions is the biggest form of resistance I see, and are actually the cause of anxiety issues, probably the most of all.
Yeah, it's going into the opposite direction of where we want, into wholeness, into oneness, where we want to go. Instead, we're removing ourselves one step even further from ourselves, putting the extra layer of detachment from emotions instead of letting it run through. And it only takes a minute or two, 90 seconds, it's technical word that goes around. But the 90, maybe first we have to do a cleanup, of course, to let the hose, open up a little, so that then once it's cleaned as we go, would you say that it's easier to actually feel it and let it flow through and move on to the next thing? It doesn't really have to last a long, horrifying experience as an event. Would you say? What would you say about that?
Yeah. And it's like, here's fear again. It's like, okay, I'll allow it. That's disrespectful to fear. It's going to do whatever it's going to do. Right. Or I'm going to let you flow. It's going to flow either round and round in our system, or it's going to flow into, through, and out of our bodies. It's going to do whatever it's going to do based on our reaction to it. So it's not so much as us letting it do its thing. It's more about having a healthy, loving, welcoming, accepting, feeling relationship with it. And then it will do whatever it's going to do, but it'll do whatever it's going to do in a healthy way, where it's just so much easier,
Yes.
And so always I'm listening for like language, about how we talk about this emotion called fear, because I always see it as a person. I'm a voice dialogue facilitator, and so everything that I'm talking about is not my personal philosophy. Yes, I didn't learn this stuff during my ski career. You know, I was considered fearless. I wasn't fearless. I didn't know what the magic was back then. What I've done is I've brokered so many conversations between clients and their fear at this point. I now know what the magic was for me during my ski career. And what the magic was that made me so fearless is also the magic that helps people permanently resolve anxiety disorders so that they don't have to manage them every day for the rest of their lives. Which is what I had was, instead of a resistance relationship with fear, I had an intimate relationship with fear. I loved feeling fear. And as a result, I never felt scared or afraid. The only thing I feel when fear is there, which it was during my ski career, was alive and bringing my A game to everything I do, and full of energy and intuitively lightning fast reflexes like a cat. Like, fear was the best part of skiing. And I think, like I was saying before, one of the best parts of life, because without it, we'd be bored. If you can learn how to have that intimacy with it. And so long as we're in resistance to it, we'll have anxiety disorders and other emotional health issues and be in our heads and all that. But if we have intimacy with this fear, then you have intimacy with the nature of life itself. You have intimacy with your own body. Just like it's, like I keep saying, so much easier. But the transition from going from a resistance, which has been taught for as long as I've heard about humanity, to an inclusive, embracing relationship with fear, we're a long ways from that, because we just keep fear shaming each other. And we keep seeing anxiety as a problem to be solved versus a emotion to connect with. And so that's where I come in.
I personally, the way that I can relate to being intimate with fear best, in my experience, is through excitement. When I feel fear, I have somehow trained myself to interpret it as, oh, I'm excited, kind of. What would you say about that?
When we're doing something by choice that involves fear, like riding a roller coaster, or for me, skiing, something where if I fall, I die, or if you're falling in love or starting a new business, it's easier because you're choosing the thing that brings in the fear to have that intimacy with it. If it's something that's being imposed upon us, like getting mugged at gunpoint or being abused or breaking your leg or some other thing that we didn't ask for that gets imposed on us, that's the real test. Can you also have intimacy with fear when those things happen? And if you can, then actually the fear is the thing that's here to, if you were to spend some time getting to know it and connecting with it, that's going to take us to our next level of development, you know, and there'll be no shadow from it. Like if you look at two people, for example, I had some friends that went to Paris, and they saw the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower and all that, and then they also got mugged at gunpoint. And they came home, and the one person was traumatized and cited that the world was too sketchy a place and that they're not going to travel anymore, and they developed PTSD and they didn't want to leave their house, and they stayed a victim forever. And they went to a therapist and talked about it, and talking about your emotions doesn't get people one step closer to feeling them, you know, and they just got lost in this loop of victim. And they felt like they were a victim to the person who mugged them, but really they were a victim to their fear at this point, because the hose was kinked, fear stuck in their system, undealt with. And that's the new injury. It's just, we call it a fear injury, but it's not a fear injury. It's a resistance to fear injury, which is a completely different way of framing it. So PTSD is a resistance to fear injury. Fear doesn't cause it. It's the resistance to the fear. Whereas the other person came home and she was talking about it to anybody that would listen at the dinner table. Her eyes were lit up, like, you know, like it was the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower were forgotten. This is the most exciting thing that happened to her all year. And of course she survived. You know, if she had died, then maybe not so great, but definitely not. But it ignited conversations with other people who were in flow with their fear. And it prompted her to file a police report and take a lot of steps, like the anger from the fear, the fight energy, to get the assailant captured. And it made her feel more powerful as a woman, as a person. And so these things that we go through that we don't ask for are also supposed to help us grow and expand. You know, fear doesn't just keep us safe in that moment, of course, the fight, flight, or freeze while it's happening, but the fear, the residual fear afterwards that lingers for several weeks or even months, keeps us on our A game and also helps us align with a universal message that takes us to the next level of our development. And there is no learning or growth without fear. Because, you know, either this is your comfort zone, either you're consciously choosing to step out of your comfort zone, or you're going to be forced to step out of your comfort zone. And even just traveling to Paris is, for some people, stepping out of their comfort zone. Like, there is no growth without fear, because you step out, you could put a new dot outside, you know, connect the new dots. This is your new comfort zone. But there will always involve fear in order to expand who you are.
I love it.
Yeah. And Alex Honnold, who free soloed El Capitan, that is how he, 10 years after being in Yosemite, expanded his comfort zone to be so great that free soloing El Capitan was not that far out of his comfort zone. And he did something that was impossible, you know, seemingly impossible. So just to reiterate, the only path to growth is by a willingness to feel fear. And that's the first part, and intimacy with the fear, even if we don't choose it.
I love the way that you are bringing it to the table. I really do. It's beautiful. And let's say I was remembering a car accident, and you know, when the event is happening, and I want to also somehow relate this into it's not that it wasn't related to workaholism. You know, we're in the cycle going really fast, overthinking, overdoing. It feels like there's no time, or maybe different ways that it might come up. Let's say if I was in a car accident, the event as it's happening, the fight, flight, or freeze thing is going to happen as it is habituated to happen, right? And then the next time I sit on the car seat, I remember this, having my body starts resisting, doesn't want to drive. And then it's like falling off the horse. It's the same thing. You fall off the horse, and you know, you're told that the best thing to do is to get back up right away, so that the fear doesn't keep lingering and becoming something else, that resisting thing. So where is the question in this?
Yes and no. You know, the jumping back on the horse could be a form of resistance to feeling the fear. You know, another of the biggest forms of resistance to feeling fear that I see is how busy we make ourselves.
Yes.
You know, and we can't even just sit and feel, like, even just the scrolling on our screens, you know, or workaholicing, like, you know, oftentimes that's just somebody's coping mechanism for not wanting to deal with fear. And so let's say you get in a car accident. You're going to, you know, it usually will happen so fast that you don't have any chance to have any fear reaction. And then afterwards, of course, you're going to feel fear. That's absolutely normal and natural. It's not a sign of personal weakness, even though we think it is. It's not. It's a perfect process. And it's here to keep us kind of, when we're in a delicate state, just a little bit making good choices, and we have to decompress, right? And then let's say we get in the car 3 weeks later and we're like crippled in fear. That's not fear that's crippling us. It's our king toes. We haven't dealt with it, and now it's built up to epic proportions. So if you feel like the fear is out of proportion to the situation, like you're explaining it, that would be a case, you know, that's our resistance to feeling fear. And then if we try to muscle through it or gut it out, right, that's also still not feeling fear. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep going despite the fact that you're here. No, that's actually a sign of fear trying to get our attention, like turning up the dial, like, okay, I will not be denied. You're now in the car again. You still haven't felt me. It's been 3 weeks. I will not be, I'm going to get right in your face, fear will say. And until and unless you find a way to connect with me. So rather than gut it out or push through it, I actually say, just stop. And now we're talking about the solution. We've been talking about the problem. Now I want to shift to the solution, which is, first of all, this is what you say to fear. It's normal and natural that you're here, especially because I've been denying you your rightful place in my life. It's normal and natural for you to be screaming at me at this point. That's step one. Step two, okay, where are you in my body? Where do you exist? And we don't want to look for scared or afraid. We want to look for any kind of discomfort, even if it's not emotional. It could show up as physical, like vertigo or a sore neck or stomach issues or a broken bone that won't heal, even though the x-ray says that it's healed, or any kind of discomfort in our bodies. That's where our fear will always go to the place where we're at our weakest, if it's stuck in our bodies, in order to try to get our attention in that way. If we live in our heads, it'll also show up in our minds and in our thoughts. So if you're, monkey mind, you just find where fear's living. Okay, it's in my mind. All right, it's in my throat. That's step two. And notice how strong is it? And the third step is that you now want to notice what your reaction is. And this is the most important step. I have some clients where we don't even get past step 3 for months because they're so in resistance to that feeling. They ignore it, they block it out, they make themselves so busy, like I mentioned. They're trying to get rid of it intellectually. They're trying to replace it with calm. I do not recommend replacing anxiety with calm. It is such a bad idea. It just buys us temporary relief. And next thing you know, you have to do it day after day after day for life. Or meditation with the goal to calm down. That's why people become, addicted, not addicted, that's the wrong word, but they have to meditate 3-5 times a day or else they can't function.
That's not really meditation, is it?
Yeah, that's just a coping mechanism. It's more form of resistance.
Yeah.
So step 3 is like, okay, how am I dealing with this? I'm ignoring it. I'm trying to replace it with calm. I'm blaming it on other people. Like there's so many, or, feeling like a victim to this. So the third step is just, what is my relationship with this person called fear that's in my throat or wherever it is? And then you just spend some time honoring the resistance, because the resistance is another form of fear. It's fear of fear. And so this one's harder to teach. It's very nuanced, but what it looks like is I have people come up with a sentence that captures how they react to the feeling, like, what's wrong with me? Or I want it gone now, or I refuse to feel this. And just repeat that thought over and over again. I refuse to feel this. 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 And again, if you're saying to a person, I refuse, like, let's say we're talking, I refuse to listen to you. 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 Like, you want to talk play mind? Like, you can start to see how ridiculous I sound when I say that to another person. I want nothing to do with you. I want nothing to do with you. And you say that for a minute and it eventually calms down and you see the ridiculousness of it. And then the fourth step is that you go back to the fear itself, that you've now gotten the resistance out of the way by honoring it. And then you just sit and you feel it. And that's what ends anxiety disorders. And that's what ends a lot of other issues that people have, is just learning how to feel again. It's not about focusing on the feeling, because that's again in the mind. It's not about turning up the dial on it. And it's not about connecting like, okay, I'm going to spend some time with you and then will you shut the hell up? Because fear's too smart for that. It has to just be a calm, like what would a good mother do? Or what would a good dog parent do with their dog who's really upset? They would just like have an intimate moment and just like, all right, you and I, let's have a moment. Let's really love on each other right now. I got you, buddy. say that to fear and you just feel it, which is a physical thing, and you can't even believe how fast it goes away or it calms down.
Let's walk through this process one more time, please, unless you would like to walk us, because I want for it to land. So you said the first step is to find where in the body fear is living. Is that
No,
correct?
first step is
Oh.
first. All right, let me go through them. I'll go through them and then I'll give you an example of a time I used it.
Okay.
So it's called my 4-step art of fear method. The first step is it's normal and natural. And especially if you've been resisting it, it's normal and natural for it to be accelerated. Second step, find where the emotion lives in your body. How
So
strong.
the first step, normal, natural, is the idea where
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to honor our minds in the first step, because our mind's got to be involved in some way, right? So then second, third, and fourth step, we leave our minds behind. Second step, where do I feel this in my body? How strong is it? Third step, what is my relationship with it? Or what is my resistance pattern with it? And then find the sentence that captures it and just repeat the sentence over and over again. And the third step is interesting because people that have an anxiety disorder, what they're actually feeling, this is huge. So I'm going to slow down. What they're actually feeling that feels so awful is the resistance to the feeling, not the feeling itself. So we got to spend some time feeling the resistance to the feeling first.
Makes
And then
total sense. May
Yeah.
I have a question while we're still on the third step? What
Yeah.
would you say if I have maybe imagery or something else and not getting words? Would that work? No.
I don't think that that would work because we're still in our heads, right? We're still
Okay.
dealing with our emotions intellectually.
Okay.
So it's more just feeling into the sentence, feeling into the sentence. And then the fourth step is then you just feel the feeling itself of fear, which you can't get to unless you go through the third step. So it's like we have two people in the room with, like, say, an anxiety disorder. We have the fear and then we have the resistance to the fear. And if I'm in resistance to the fear and then I just try to get rid of if I have the fear and then I'm in resistance to the fear, like these two are bickering. And if I just try to shut this guy up, I'm just resisting the resistance, right? And we're back where we started. So whenever there's an anxiety disorder, it's like suffering equals discomfort times resistance. So we need to honor both the resistance and the discomfort, or have intimacy with both of them. So step 3 is about identifying the resistance and having intimacy with it. So, and then step 4 is feeling the fear. Here's an example of how I put this in motion. I was about to give a speech, a keynote in front of a big audience. I was way out of my comfort zone. This is right after my book came out. And I was, anyway, it was intense. And I'm about to talk about this stuff, right? And I'm practically having a panic attack, ironically. So I find a private space, took me 2 minutes to do this. And I said to myself, well, it's normal and natural for me to have fear. Notice I call it fear. I don't call it anxiety. If we want to really nip this, we really need to start calling it by its original name, so that we're more real, raw, and honest about what it is we're dealing with. So it's normal and natural for me to have fear. And especially because I've been in resistance to it, it's a lot. Step 2, what was I feeling? I was feeling nervous. It was in my throat and in my chest, and it was a level 10 out of 10. Suffering equals discomfort, level 10. And then the third step times resistance, what was my relationship with that? Well, I was doing the thing that I usually do, which is I was ignoring it. And I was ignoring it to a level 10. And I also I wasn't in the mood for fear. And it was showing up as, I don't want to be here. So these were my sentences. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I'm not in the mood for fear right now. I just wish I were home, sitting on the couch, watching a movie with my cat. Like, I just don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I don't want to feel this. Now, mind you, this is like a few minutes before I'm going to go on stage. And it seems dangerous to do this, but I needed to honor my resistance because it was a level 10. And I just said that over and over again for about a minute, and then it dissipated. Whenever you give one of these children that kind of undivided love and attention, they calm right down. All children do. And it was down to about a level 1. And then I now had access to the feeling of nervous, which is another name for fear itself. And then I just connected in an intimate way without thought. This is not, it's very important. It's not about focusing. It's about feeling. And like if you focus on a cat versus feel a cat, very different things, right? So I'm now feeling my fear in my chest. And I did that for 1 minute. And instead of 10 times 10 equals 100 suffering, I got it down to 1 times 1. Because you want to always have some fear if you're about to give a speech. You want to be a little underprepared, so the fear's there. And I was calm within 2 minutes, and I went on stage and gave a great speech. And there was no rationalizing away, none of this breathing exercises, breathing in calm, none of this, like, I'm totally prepared, I got this, which works, but there's consequences for that. You know, all you do is kink the hose. And so that's the 4-step Art of Fear method.
Beautiful. And please tell us, how do you know that you are actually feeling the feeling, or if you need to keep going with the 3? It's you just know it when it's there. Is that the answer? You just know it, or
yeah, there just can't be any goals. You know, just it's kind of like Eastern meditation versus Western meditation. Eastern meditation, you meditate not to improve your life, not to feel better. You just meditate. You just,
for its own sake.
right. Western meditation, you meditate in order to feel better or to have a
That's
calmer
not
life.
meditation.
Right. And so that's goal-oriented meditation. So this is like a meditation where you connect with this feeling, but there's no goals involved.
Yes,
And
I'm saying, like, do you know that you are feeling it? How does it feel different without the resistance?
you know it.
Yeah.
You know it. It's like, you know, if you're like connecting with your dog in an intimate way, you know it, right? Or your lover, or your pain. You just know it. It's a spiritual experience. And
Beautiful.
it was the secret of why I was such a good skier too. I didn't always do it right. I did some things wrong by fear, and I did some things right by fear. But the things that I did right by fear is what I'm explaining. And the things that I did wrong by fear led to crash adrenal system for me, burnout, injuries, a lot of injuries. And I wish I could go back and do my ski career over again and keep the intimacy and not have, you know, so much resistance to fear. It would have made a huge difference.
And this seems and feels playful enough to me. It feels very playful, and
Yes.
it's directly, yeah. But I'm wondering if anyone in our audience, how do you think we can bring it even more into play mind? Where could the gap be that we could fill for it's just show up, is what's coming up for me. Just show up into the exercise to see that it's norm. Start with the step 1 and let the method take you there, is what I'm thinking. What do you think?
Oh, I just came up with an idea. So the primary emotions, fear, anger, sadness, joy, and sexuality. You know, you could either get 5 stuffed animals, or you could just have 3 stuffed animals. And notice joy is in there too. And joy is usually something that people have an easier time with. But if you're not willing to feel fear, you're not going to really feel a lot of joy. You know, you can't just selectively block out an emotion without inadvertently blocking them all out. So get 5 stuffed animals, or 3, fear, joy, and sadness could be your 3. These are the primary emotions, and tell your friends and family, like, look, I'm trying to combat emotion shaming and fear shaming. I'm actually going to try to get out of my head or stop being so busy and actually connect with what I feel, because that's what it means to be human, is we're here to feel, right? And I've lost my humanity, and I really would like your support to help me connect with these emotions. And you don't need to show them the stuffed animals, but you will not find support in this. Like if you say to somebody, I'm feeling very angry right now, people are like, oh, you need to let that go. Oh, well, that's not, you need to go for a walk and whatever. Like there's no support in our community or culture, very rarely, for feeling our emotions. Sadness. What do? We apologize. Well, so have these 5 stuffed animals, bring them with you. They're your children. And whenever you're feeling sadness, take the sadness one out. You're not going to apologize. It's cute, right? Right. And I just want you to just connect with the stuffed animal if that seems easier. Or fear's the big one. If you can learn how to connect with fear, you can pretty much learn how to connect with anything. Fear's the one that we get most shamed for. I also recommend never apologizing again whenever you're sad or crying. That's rule number 1, no more sorry, right? I even see people who just had their son or daughter killed and they're being interviewed and they apologize for their sadness. It's like hurts my soul that we are a world of people. And what's even worse in Africa or South America. I mean, it's bad everywhere, but it's just nobody's allowed to feel their emotions. I mean, if you have a partner that you can play act with, you can be exaggerate, like I'm fear and run around the house, or anger and like pound on pillows or whatever. But here's the most important part. I don't want anybody to try to figure out what they're sad about, or try to figure out what fear is coming from, or what the anger is about, because then we're in our heads trying to interpret or understand something that we'll probably never be able to understand, because we may think it's one thing, but it's probably something else entirely. Just without thought, without trying to understand where it's coming from, just connect with your emotions without trying to assign any kind of meaning or thought process or understanding to why they're here. Just feel. Like, make it as simple as possible, like a little child connecting with a stuffed animal.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Tell us, do you have a free gift for the audience?
I do. A lot of people don't know what their relationship is with fear. And so on my website, KristenUlmer.com, ENULMER, there's a free fear and anxiety assessment on my homepage. And it's a series of 20 questions that are in themselves super fascinating and will give you a lot of insights on your relationship with fear. And then from there, you'll be given next step advice based on what type you are, or, what kind of relationship you have with fear. Some people are totally in flow with fear. Some people are completely in resistance. And then there's the paradox in between. So it's a lot of shades of gray, but whichever one most resonates with you, you'll be given next step to take in order to form a healthier relationship with fear and other emotions.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Our short time that I have to respect our audience's time. Otherwise, I could keep talking with you for a good long time. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.